moment of story that I really, really enjoyed teaching. So one of them was called The Landlady by Roald Dahl. And the other one you probably know is The Spider and the Fly by Mary Howitt. And so those two are very much about manipulation and about outward appearance. They look really, the landlady and the spider look, really nice and pleasant. And they're like, come on in. And then like they inside are like pure monsters. And so that's kind of what I wanted to write, was my own take of that short story that I absolutely loved and my students loved, and to modernize it and to have like a version.
For anyone who's been listening since the Between the Lines days, you will definitely know my guest this week because it's Yasmin Angoe, who has been on for all of her Nena Knight trilogy books. And I also can't shut up about those books on the Friday episodes as well. So you probably heard me talk about those. But she went in a different direction after she finished the Nena Knight series and wrote a domestic thriller that was just twisty and twisty and twisty. So here's what it's about. After years of self-exile, Jacinda Jack Brodie is back in Brook Haven, South Carolina, but the small cliffside town no longer feels like home. Jack hasn't been there since the beloved chief of police fell to his death, and all the whispers said she was to blame. And the chief was Jack's father. Racked with guilt, Jack left town with no plans to return. But when her granddad lands in the hospital, she rushes back to her family, bracing herself to confront the past. Brook Haven feels different now. Wealthy newcomer Faye Arden has transformed the notorious Moor Manor into a quaint country inn. Jack's convinced something sinister lurks beneath Faye's perfect exterior, yet the whole town fawns over their charismatic new benefactor. And when Jack discovers one of her granddad's prized possessions in Faye's office, she knows she has to be right. But as Jack continues to dig, she stumbles upon dangerous truths that hit too close to home. With not only her life, but also her family's safety on the line, Jack discovers that maybe some secrets are better left buried. This one is just, it's so hard to put down once you start reading it. It almost has like a Southern Gothic vibe in the sense that it's in the Low Country, and there's kind of the drama amongst relationships that you get with a Gothic thriller. I don't know. I'm not saying it's completely that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So if you love stories where the main character is returning to the scene of the crime or back to a small town they try to stay away from and the past comes to haunt them in the present, you will love this new one from Yasmin Angoe. That being said, let's hear from her. I know we're here to dive into Not What She Seems, but I did have to ask you first, did you miss Nena Knight at all writing this standalone?
Yes, absolutely. I miss Nena Knight even right now. So it always feels weird not to be working in anything that has to do with Nena, except for like promo and stuff like that. Because Nina's been a part of my life for so long, even before I started writing her. So, but she was kind enough to relinquish me a little bit and let me find a couple of new friends to kind of handle and mess around with. So yeah, I miss her, and hopefully one day I'll get back to her. She's always there, so I always keep
That's
it very
true.
close by.
Yeah, because I was thinking about it even just because like it's still one of my favorite series that I talk about a lot.
Yes.
So I was even thinking about it as I was reading, and I was like, well, I mean, like I also like where it ended with the third book, and yeah, she can always be there. So I'm glad I wasn't the only one missing her though.
Yes, no, absolutely. She's my girl. I love her.
Yeah. Well, with this one, you took a little bit of a shift, still a thriller, but instead of kind of like the action thriller of the Nena Knight series, this one's a little bit more of a domestic thriller.
Mhm.
Was there anything that stood out to you about writing it that like felt different?
Definitely, because it's a domestic versus the action espionage of Nina. So, Nina was international and on a much bigger scale. Nena has, a certain set of skills that she has trained for years. And so we know that, at the end of the day, she's going to, win and kick some butt. And so when I was, thinking about Jack and like her story and wanting to make, this domestic thriller that was much more internalized, that was much more everyday person, and how does this person get out of these predicaments when their skill set is research. I mean, she's a research assistant, and so what does she do when she comes across, a killer or, or whatever in this small town where everyone is supposed to be so sweet and so, proper and all of this stuff. And so it was fun. It was challenging because when I have, those physical scenes, she can't just whip out blades and guns and things like that. She has to, really use her thinking and really use her fight or flight, for real, because she doesn't know the things that Nena does, and she's not as comfortable with that kind of interaction as Nena is. She's not that kind of a thinker. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even that's definitely the character difference is even kind of so different. I hadn't really thought of that, but it felt different.
mhm.
Um, was there anything about it that felt different, like writing a standalone versus a series too? Like, was the process for that at all any different?
Yeah. Let me think. Well, it felt more, I could close things off more. Like I didn't have to leave, a little bit of something open,
Mhm.
like I had to do with Nena. With Nena, I had to really think about like what are the overarching themes and threads that I want to expand over, three books or whatever. And with Jack, it could be like just all up in this thing. It's one story that can be told, and that's all she wants to tell, and that's it. So that was a little bit more freeing, and you could just go, balls to the wall with this one because that's it. And you don't have to think about too much. So, but that also means that there's a whole lot, because I like to write like complex characters. So there's a whole lot
Mhm.
that I want to get the reader to understand about this person. That I only have this one time for them
Mhm.
for the reader to get to know her, get to trust and love her, or get annoyed with her at points. They don't have three books to really be invested in her like they did with Nina.
Yeah, that was kind of making me think of like the difference between movies and then like episodic stuff, actually, is
Mhm.
what that sounded similar to. Because sometimes you have like that long arc if you have like 6 hours to tell a story versus like an hour and a half.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Nice. So, with Not What She Seems, what was like the initial inspiration for the story?
So the initial inspiration, besides living in South Carolina and loving, like, my favorite places are along like the coastal towns. So I knew I definitely wanted to set it there because I just love that whole the low country and just that whole feel of it, and the scenery. That it could be so idyllic and pretty in the day, close to the beach. They've got these, really lush swamps and woods and things like that. And then at night, it's really, freaky and scary because, these woods, and there are things that can like eat you. And, like it's just very dangerous in those swamps and those marshes. And it just made me think about, people and how outwardly they could be wonderful and look sweet, and Southerners look very sweet. And then, they can like really hit you with a bless your heart, and you're like, oh, they really came from my neck, clutch my pearls and everything, because they can like insult you with a smile, and you'll be like, thank you. And you'll just never know that you've been insulted. And I love that, right? So
Yeah.
it just made me think about mask. And then also, when I was teaching, there were these two particular, there was a poem and a story that I really, really enjoyed teaching. I really liked teaching the dark things. So I guess that's
Hmm.
really on brand for me. And so one of them was called The Landlady by Roald Dahl. And the
Hmm.
other one you probably know is The Spider and the Fly by Mary
Hmm.
Howitt. And so those two are very much about manipulation and about outward appearance. They look really, the landlady and the spider look, really nice and pleasant. And they're like, come on in. And then like they inside are like, pure monsters. And so that's kind of what I wanted to write, was my own
Yeah.
take of that short story that I absolutely loved and my students loved, and to
Yeah.
modernize it, and to have like a version. So when you read it, if you've read The Landlady or even The Spider and the Fly, you'll see elements of that. And that poem is referenced in the book even, because all of those things about manipulation and about like
Mhm.
seduction of people and bringing them in to like ensnare them, is
Mm.
definitely what I wanted to talk about.
That's cool that it was like it was kind of more of a concept that came to you, not necessarily like the external plot. It was
Hmm.
more like just that's cool because I love stories that examine that specifically, like the looking one way and being another. It works so well
Yes.
in thrillers.
Yes.
That is
Yes.
so cool.
I'm always like that when I people watch. I'm like, but how are they really? Like, I'm just
Yes.
always waiting for like the true mask to crack into the, because I just always think about that stuff,
Yeah.
and so yeah, it fascinates me. It's probably a very morbid thing to be thinking about, like, this person is very sinister, but like we see that all the
Right.
time, right? Like, so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you if it is morbid, so we can be morbid together.
Hey.
um, so speaking of like that setting that you're talking about too, I know in your acknowledgments you talked about how your friend and your husband like helped you develop Brook Haven. So what was like that process like kind of, or how did you guys all do that?
Yeah, like I just like her, so my friend's name is Medina, and so I would like text her and be like, she's from like that Somerville, Charleston area, and
Oh
so I
yeah.
would just say, hey, this is what I kind of want to have. My task to the both of them, because my husband is he's a principal, but he was a social studies teacher, so
Mm,
geography is like his thing. And then
yeah.
I asked the two of them, like, I wanted to have a cliff, because I was like, I need a cliff that's high enough so someone can die when they fall off of it. And so this is the low country, which means everything is low. There aren't like mountains and things like that. So we needed to find an area where the rivers may intersect, and that
Mm-hmm.
could like have some sort of a higher point that someone
Mm-hmm.
could die. And I needed that. And so that's how we developed it together in the low country. And there are things like that. So they wouldn't be super, super high, but it's high enough to hurt someone. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
how they helped me, because I was like, I don't know. And I have a really bad grasp of like topography and things like that. So
Me
they were
too.
on it. They were taking pictures. They were sending me pictures from like Google, I don't know, View or whatever. And I'm like, this is too much. But like independently, they didn't work together. But both of them were just like bombarding me with aerial shots of things that are possible. And so yeah, they really got into it. It was funny.
They were committed.
They really were. They're like, we're gonna find you this deadly cliff. One way or the other, we're creating something.
That is so cool. And I hadn't you kind of phrased it that way, but I hadn't even thought of like literally the low country. Like that's why it would be kind of hard to like construct that kind of thing. But you're like,
Right,
we
right.
need the cliff,
Yeah.
guys. um so with Jack, she is like kind of like quote unquote the bad Brodie sister to the
Hmm.
people of Brookhaven and kind of to her family. And then even this is in the synopsis, so it's not like a spoiler. She's even moved away from Brookhaven for so long, but she still kind of makes some questionable decisions. She's like pretty layered with her decision making. But I loved that you let her be imperfect. So how did you like get to know Jack?
Yeah, like I wanted her to be very opposite of the protagonist that I'd been working with.
Mhm.
Nina is so measured, and she really thinks about everything, and she wouldn't make like all of those mistakes, and
Mhm.
she isn't someone who's kind of like a fatalist like Jack is. Jack is very much, when we meet her, and throughout, she's really trying to punish herself all the
Mhm.
time. And so she knows she's making bad decisions, but those are her punishments for what she feels, that she's done to her father, and what everyone, believes that she's done, to her father and to her life. Like I said, Southerners are very proper. And so there's a way, they want you to be, especially her mom, with, in society and things like that. And Jack never wanted to be that way. And so she's always pushed back, and she's always been, the trouble, the problem one, even though she's the older one, and her sister is, becoming a doctor and everything. And so she is, their roles are kind of reversed, her and her sister. And so Jack just leans into just being that bad kid, that everyone believes. And she herself becomes to believe it, which leads her into all these poor decisions where you're like, oh my gosh, Jack, you're so reckless. Like, why would you say that to Conrad? And how did you not see that he was like a creep from the beginning? All these things.
Yes.
Even I was like, Jack, like, girl, you getting on I need you to get a grip. Like, what is going on with you? But like, she needed to kind of go through all of that and really find her way. And that, even her being away from Brook Haven for 6 years, it's self-exile. Like, she didn't have to go, and her mom and sister would have, and her granddad at that time would have fought for her, and nobody really would have thought, oh, did you kill your dad and all, even though nobody knows what really happened, and even she doesn't know. But she is someone who just wants to wallow in her, I'm bad, and so therefore I must punish myself, for this thing, and always feel guilty. So that's what really drives her to, when she sees what she sees about, that other person, about Faye, and she's like, wait a minute, that's really, this is her moment where she can, let me do something finally, for someone else other than me.
Yeah, she finally gets to that point.
Yeah.
It is cool, living in that character development where it just there are periods of your life where you can be destructive for different reasons, and you're just not making sense. But like you're saying, a big part of her story arc, and then the story in general, is that she gets to go do things differently, which is always empowering.
Always.
In a story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Bookwild, and if you are, could I ask you a favor? Could you go and rate and review this podcast on whatever platform you're listening? Ratings and reviews make the biggest difference in discoverability of the podcast, and I definitely want to find all of our fellow thriller readers out there. So if you could go rate the podcast and leave a short review, that would make a huge difference. Thank you, and let's get back to the show. The other thing I noticed, actually, that I feel like both the Nena Knight series and this book have in common is that you really dive into family relationships in both of them. And kind of the good and the bad, and also I feel like it always plays well into thrillers. So what kind of draws you to writing about families and thrillers?
I think it's because families really are also, some family dynamics are also something that I'm really fascinated by. For example, my husband's family, it's a huge family. And I, because, my parents immigrated here, our immediate family is small. Everyone else is back in Ghana. Right. And so I don't know them as well, because I've been here most of my life. So when I, met my husband and then met his family, and there's so many, right? And I'm just like, wow. And so you see all these dynamics, and this book in no way has anything to do with them in terms of their family dynamics. They're really warm and welcoming. And, I dedicate the book to them because Granddad's home is a replica of their home. They have their grandparents' home that they all congregate at for all holidays and things. And so I just thought oh my gosh, it's so wonderful. Look at all this family. They're so nice and welcoming and stuff. But then there's always layers, right? And I'm thinking of, a family that looks so great on the outside, but on the inside, there's this internal strife. Why is Jack pushing back? What is this thing between her and her mother with, the comparison, the failure, the disappointment? What's going on with her mom that she pushes Jack so hard? And those kinds of things, because I feel like all of that plays into how we are, how we grow up, the people we interact with. If we have loving, family that is just open and honest and accepting of whatever we do, like I've seen of, my husband's family, then they grow up differently and they grow up more free and happy, right? And then if we're keeping secrets and if we have generational trauma that we, unknowingly put upon our kids, then that makes their decision making and the way they move in life
Mhm.
infinitely harder. And so those are the things that I wanted to cover in terms of her actual family dynamics. What of that would take so much precedence in her life that it makes her feel like she's not worthy,
Yeah,
she feels that way, but then also she pushes back. So she herself is very confused, like, do I want to be like my mother or do I not? And like,
right.
why is my mom like this? And and we I'm a parent, you're a parent, there are some things that we just wouldn't, we don't tell our kids, right? About,
Mhm.
am I right? You are. Yeah, I think we've talked about
I
your
know
kids.
I'm not. I'm a dog parent, but you can keep
You're a
going.
dog parent. Well, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But
You're totally okay. I was following you.
okay, my apologies. But
Right.
even, there are things that we might not share with others because those are our things. And so they may, and it doesn't even have to be a parent. It could be, friends or your spouse
Mhm.
or whoever, and they just don't get why are they this kind of way, because we don't
Right.
share those things. And so those are what I wanted to really talk about. Like when you don't
Yeah.
share and you act a certain way and the people misread like your intentions, and then that just wastes a whole lot of time. And so yeah, I
Yes.
went, that was a very long response, of my apologies,
I
but yeah.
love it. I loved it. No, that's what it's similarly, it's what I think is so interesting about family stuff in thrillers is
Mhm.
like what you're saying, like how profound the impact of your family is on you for your whole life long. Um, and uh, I'm also a sucker. Same thing. The family's pretending to be one way, and like there's
Yeah,
actually other feelings going on.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You definitely like feel even more of the family relationships in this one since it's so much more of a domestic thriller. So you're even
Right.
just spending more time. Like the
Hmm.
family is even more important in the whole world building of it all.
Right.
There's kind of like another theme running through it of like your own stories and like other people either telling the story for you or stealing your stories and trying to profit from them and benefit from them off of your
Right,
trauma.
right. Hmm. Yeah.
um, was that something you were intentionally like writing from the beginning, or did it just kind of show up in the story?
Oh, that's a really good question. What was I trying to do with that person there? Um, yeah, like I wanted that person. So what I think I wanted was when the moment when Jack feels, I guess, vulnerable enough where she actually kind of discusses what happened that night that her dad died, and
Hmm.
she again makes the wrong decision. Maybe at that moment she thought it was the right decision and trusted the wrong person, right? And she
Yeah.
didn't see that person for who he was, and then he flips it on her
Mhm.
and says, I'm going to use this, and like, who's going to really listen to a story from you anyway? I'll do better with it, even though it's not my story to tell. And there are things that, I mean, that happens in real life, like you said, like you'll trust someone, and then all of a sudden, you know what, and it's like even like a coworker kind of thing, I think.
Mm.
Like you trust someone, you tell them something, and then they go and they either like share what you said and it like messes up stuff for you, or they take the credit, and then, like, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
so I think that's kind of what I was thinking, is like just people who you kind of trust, and then they just, not family, but like people, like coworkers, the outside sources, they just come and like
Mhm.
just totally upend you, and betray you in a way that you didn't think that
Yeah.
they would, when you have put your trust in them to an extent,
Mhm.
to share that part of you. And
Yeah.
that's happened to me before in the workplace. So I think I was
Oh,
really channeling that.
yeah. 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 I mean, it's I would be enraged. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can
yeah.
only
I was
imagine.
pretty enraged. I was pretty enraged. I did trust the person, and they did
Right.
they did me dirty. And so, and
Yes.
that is definitely in the book. It's, you hear that, you see that with Conrad, you see that with Faye, actually. And so
Hmm.
I'm channeling my, because it's something, it hurts, when people
Yeah.
betray you, when you like really thought that you guys were kind of cool. So
Yeah. And then it's harder to trust yourself too. And that part is like so frustrating.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it changes you, right? It makes you a different
Hmm.
person. and
Hmm.
and I resent that, because it makes you a colder person.
Yes.
And it makes you, like you said, you don't trust people more, you're more closed off, and I resent that, because you were
Hmm.
free before, and now you can't be so
Yes.
much. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's horrible.
Yeah, it is. Kind of in line with that, the other theme that kind of runs through the book is like having good intentions, but still doing disastrous things, even if you like could have a good intention behind it.
Yes.
So, did you kind of purposefully craft like Jack's story around that, or like how did you get that part in there?
Yeah, I definitely thought about that. I think I do use that quote, like the road to hell is paved in good intentions.
Hmm.
And that's also a Madonna and Justin Timberlake song. So I was listening to
Yes.
that song a lot. But I really think that way, that sometimes with our, even with our villains and stuff, like they have good intentions, they want something that everybody wants, but the
Hmm.
way they go about it is horrible. And so, they try, they have these good intentions, but they just can't get, they can't deliver it the way that it should be delivered. And so
Hmm.
you kind of feel like, oh man, like had they made a different choice, had they gone a different way, things would be different, right? And so, like, that's what I wanted to explore, even with the relationship with Jack and her mother, and any and other people, like in the town, and Jack and herself, like, it's being misunderstood, and people just don't understand someone's intent. They won't
Hmm.
share it, and so we're left to just, interpret it how we are going to interpret it, and we have the totally wrong take. And then again, now a relationship is ruined, or there is none at all, because we didn't just, put what we, are, or what we want at face value, just up front. We're hiding everything,
Yes.
to save face. And so, like, that's what, the book is just about, like hiding things and trying to save face. And then it just turns out, like, to hell.
Yes, that's what I was just realizing. I was like, that is actually kind of the core of it all. Is if they had all been a little more truthful with each other, almost none of it would have happened. The bad stuff.
Yeah, yeah, for real, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I loved it so much. I was excited to kind of read something a little bit different from you. Not that I will always read action from you too.
Thank you, thank you.
But I really enjoyed it. It was super fun.
Yay.
Where can people follow you to stay up to date with everything you're working on?
Yeah, so you can definitely follow me on Instagram, um, and why I think it's author underscore Yasmin Angoe, and
Yeah,
then I have an author page on Facebook and Twitter, like I'm on, or X as they want to call it, but it's
yeah,
always gonna be Twitter to me.
it
Um,
will be.
Yes, yes. There's my website that you can
Mhm.
drop a message if it's a nice one, and I'll, respond and stuff like that. So I'm around and always happy to interact with people. I'm really happy, Kate, that you enjoyed the book, because I was worried, coming from action espionage to this,
Mhm.
how it would be received, if people would like Jack, since she's
Mhm.
so very different than Nena and stuff like that. And so it
Mhm.
really makes me warm inside. I really appreciate
Mhm.
it that you do, like, Jack. She does want to
Yes.
be like and accepted, and that you like the story that she had to tell, and then you like this little change from me. So I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I'm excited for everything else you try out. So
Oh, thank you.
you're welcome. I'll put all those links in the show notes. And then otherwise, hopefully, we'll be talking sometime about a next book.
We sure will.